Welcome to Centermate Podcast. We have a special edition episode for you today with an expert.
We do. The guru of cleaning products.
He is. We have Ross from High Caliber Cleaning Supplies. G'day, Ross.
G'day, guys, and thanks for having me on board. And hopefully we can get some great advice to your listeners on caring for your guns.
That's the plan.
That is the plan. And we've entitled this episode Looking After Your Bang Stick. So we're going to talk all about looking after your bang stick with an expert in the field. We've got Ross from High Caliber Cleaning Supplies, as I mentioned. Ross, tell people a little bit about yourself and your company that you run.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, guys. I've been a hunter and shooter since about the age of 16. Know a thing or two about keeping guns clean, and I also am the owner of High Caliber Cleaning Supplies. We manufacture premium quality rifle and pistol and everything else cleaning equipment, tools, gun cleaners, oils, and all the rest of it to keep your bang stick in top order.
Exactly. And for those keen listeners at home, they will know that we have a good relationship with High Caliber, and they support us and we support them. So it's a good two-way deal.
It is, and very grateful for your support and your listeners' support too. Wouldn't be able to do this without them.
Very true. Very true. Well, what say we roll into some questions? Let's pick your brain. Rossi,
Yep.
First cab off the rank. What is the basic equipment required to clean and maintain a firearm?
Okay, so I'll start with what I think's really the bare minimum, and then some additional extras which I like to use. Probably number one, I think probably the most important thing you're going to need is you're going to need your rod. One piece is definitely preferred, but 3 pieces are something that's good to have in your arsenal as well, because you can just use the butt piece as a little cleaning brush to get into some of those hard to reach places, especially when cleaning the inside of a bolt out. Number 2 is your cotton patches. Whether you buy them as in a bulk roll and you cut them yourself, or you buy them pre-cut, they're cheap as chips. Definitely something you need. Secondly is a good bore cleaner, and then thirdly is a gun oil, and then just little bits and pieces like cotton buds, toothbrush, everything like that. And I think that is enough to keep a firearm good forever. You shouldn't really need, you don't need to overcomplicate it too much. If you're in a hunting scenario where you might be taking 5 animals a year, maybe taking 6 or 7 shots, I think that is probably adequate for what you need. A couple of things I think that are great additions to make that process easier. One is a good gun vise or gun bench, maybe even a tripod that you can put on the front of that rifle just to hold it in the right spot. And I think with those small amounts of gear, that's the bare essentials that you need.
So just with the rod, why 1 piece preferred over a 3-piece or 4-piece?
Obviously, when you're for the rifling of the gun, if you're using a brush, or even a patch, that is going to turn inside the barrel, and that's why they've all got swinging handles or they're free spinning handles. With the 3-piece, there are threaded rods, and you screw them into each other. I have had them in the past where they're unscrewed while pushing it through the barrel or pulling it back through the barrel. They can unscrew, and then over pushing it constantly through, they can break apart. And if those 2 parts come apart and you're pushing it or pulling it, you do run the risk of scratching or damaging something inside the barrel. If every time you push a patch through, you tighten the components, I think you're going to be okay. And they are cheap, and they are a good way of storing it, and a good way of taking a rod into the bush that can break down to 3 parts.
Just one thing you said there was pushing the patch through or pulling it through. There's been sort of discussions with us. Should you pull the patch through from like in reverse from what the bullet would go?
Yeah, I think that's definitely personal preference. I do like a jag. So obviously I sell the jags, the brass jags, and I push patches through to clean the gun. Once the gun is clean, I will get a oily patch and I will push it through and I will pull it through. I'll take that patch out, I'll put another patch in, soak that in oil, and I'll do the same thing again. It depends what I'm doing. If I'm trying to clean the gun, I want all that carbon to go one way, and I want it to stay out. I don't want to then clean the carbon one way and then drag it back through and could possibly be dragging carbon back into the gum. So if I'm on a cleaning process, I'm always pushing one way.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense. Definitely.
And
You
the
mentioned,
same with the brass brush. I'll push the brush through, use a bore guide. I'll push the brush through. I'll unscrew it when it gets to the end, pull it back, clean it in the bore cleaner, re-soak the brass brush, screw it back onto the rod and push it through again. And I normally do that twice, but I don't wait for my gun to be completely filthy before I clean it, but we'll move on to that later, I guess.
yeah,
You mentioned, and this is just a theory that I sort of have in my head. So your rod comes apart and it could damage the inside. I have this theory where the amount of force that it takes for that bullet to go through the barrel is way more force than you could ever inflict on that barrel by pushing something through or et cetera, et cetera. So how true do you reckon that statement is? True or
Obviously, being in a mechanic for 17 years, I've seen a lot of metals. I've been a fabricator for a long time too. So I've seen that you can whack copper or lead on steel all day long and it won't scratch it or mar it because it is softer. So anytime you've got a softer material going up against a harder material, the softer material is always going to deform, damage, mark. If you've got a steel rod and a steel barrel, you do run the risk of scratching it because they're both the same hardness. If it was a brass rod or a carbon fiber rod or something like that, which you wouldn't use because it would damage the threads, I mean, you will get carbon fiber rods, but that will be fine because it's softer than steel. I'm not saying that it is or it isn't going to damage it. I think the consensus out there, or my view, is that a one-piece rod, probably is better. And do you really want the inconvenience of your rod coming apart on you when you're cleaning?
yeah, very true.
Yep.
True. All right, Ross, you've got all your equipment ready to go. Could you recommend in stages, what is the method that you use to clean your gun?
Yeah, I've seen lots of different methods, and I think that I've seen methods that I like more than my method. So this isn't the only method to use. This is just how I clean my gun. So obviously I like the bore guides, and since we've been having and using the bore guides, and everyone that's got them, they love them. You can actually pour a little bit of bore solvent in a hole in the top to capture that patch so you can really soak the barrel out. But basically I've been kind of not pulled up on this, but this is my first step. So I'll soak a couple of patches in the bore cleaner and I will push a wet soaked patch through straight away with a jag, and that will fall out the top of the barrel when I'm pulling the rod back. So all that carbon's come all the way through and out the barrel and falls in. Some people use a bottle or a tub or something to catch that that patch as it comes out. That's how I do it. Some people like a dry patch to start with. They just do a dry patch straight away before their wet patch. They're both okay, but if you're going to run a wet patch through anyway, I don't personally see the point in running a dry patch first. And I'll do that twice. And then I will soak, and they normally come through completely black. And the new bore cleaner that we run here seems to remove so much carbon on that first pass through, more than any other product I've used in the past. And that's why we say, use less elbow grease to get a cleaner gun. And then I will get my brass brush. I will push that through. I will unscrew it. I'll soak it in the bore cleaner again. So it's already pre-soaked. It's already wet. I'll then come back. I will screw the brass brush in there. I'll push that through. And then I will put the jag back on. I'll push as many patches as it takes to get it as clean as I'm comfortable with. Maybe that's 8 patches, something like that. Maybe 10 tops. That way I've pulled all the carbon out and I've pulled all of the bore cleaner and solvent out. You do want to remove that. It is a foreign body in there. Then finally, I'll get a patch holder. We sell brass ones as well. Plastic ones are fine. Anything that is softer than what your barrel's made out of. And then I will soak 2 patches, have 2 patches pre-soaked in oil. You can drop oil with the bottles, maybe 8 to 10 drops. Just have that patch as soaked as you can. I will push that patch all the way through and then I will pull it back. If it's dirty for whatever reason, I will then clean the gun again, which is pretty rare. I do make sure that I've cleaned. I'll even clean the end of the barrel before I put the oil patch in, because you can get a bit just stuck on the end of the barrel where it's come out and kind of mushroomed out. And then I will do that same again with another oiled patch, and that's it in the safe. If you know, a lot of comp guys, I've been to comps, I've been in gun clubs. I'm not a comp shooter myself, but I'm in gun clubs that shoot a lot of comps. They will remove that oil before their first shot. Some of those guys are so adamant that any oil in the barrel whatsoever is going to change the way that that rifle shoots. That's, you know, I think if you're in an industry or a hobby and you do it long enough, you're always going to find opposing opinions in anything you do, and ways that people like to do things, and you know, people say you shouldn't do those things, but that's the way I like to do them. That gets my rifle as clean as I want, and it's quick, it's easy, and it's only a few steps.
With the oil, so oil's non-compressible. So obviously, is that why they want to get rid of all the oil out of the barrel?
Yeah, look, I'm not entirely sure. It is a foreign object. There should be nothing in the barrel whatsoever. Anything in there is considered a foreign object. You do want to protect inside the barrel, of course. If you're in wet, damp conditions, the inside of the barrel can rust just as bad as the outside. It's probably less protected than a Cherico or painted or blued barrel. So it is something you do need to run oil in to protect. But yeah, I've heard, and my uncle, who was a gamekeeper in the UK, kind of brought me up on shooting. He was a big advocate for removing any oil that was in the barrel. He thought it affected the accuracy. I don't know why. It's probably a theory, but maybe one of your listeners knows. But yeah, obviously it doesn't compress. It is a foreign object, and it could do something with the barrel.
Mm. Ross, you talked about the you know, the gunk sort of mushrooming out the end of your barrel.
Mm-hmm.
How cautious do you need to be of your crown?
Yeah, you obviously you don't want to do anything that's going to cause any damage to that. And I just use one of the microfiber white cloths we've got. Once I've pushed a few patches through, I'll put that on there. And being white, you can actually see if you've pulled anything off, which is great. You can see if the cloth is dirty and it needs a wash. You can run what you think is a clean barrel, and this is, I've seen so many customers' photos where they're like, I think my gun is clean. They oil up a rag, they wipe the white rag over, and it's almost brown with what looks like rust. And they've gone, wow, I thought my gun was clean, but your products have shown me that it isn't. So yeah, I think that, to answer your question, I think you can see if you have any mushrooming, if you do have a white cloth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with the cleaning, when you first buy a rifle, are you running it in, you know, like fire around, clean it?
Yeah.
Fire around, clean it. Are you doing that?
Yeah, I am. I do that with all my rifles. I follow the procedure in the manual. So what it might be, clean the gun thoroughly to begin with. And, you know, you're the only person I've ever heard on a podcast talk about packing grease.
Mm.
There's a lot of YouTube videos, especially with Tikkas. When you strip the bolt down, that spring, the main spring, which is which holds the firing pin, they are covered in packing grease. And you should remove that and oil the bolt. Have you found that, Josh?
Yeah, I have. I didn't do it when I was a child because I just didn't know, and no one had told me. But as the years progressed, I sort of realised it, and I've removed. I pretty much degrease everything now, right from the word get go. Degrease it, remove it all. I am unsure what to use on the firing spring afterwards. At the moment, I just put your oil on it. I don't know whether you should put grease back on it or not, or a sort of thicker or thick lubricant. I don't know.
I think because of obviously, you know, most people out there know the secret of our oil, and you know, a lot of people say, oh well, that's overkill to use a base oil that's such a high quality. But I think that's why we've looked at gun greases, we've looked at formulations for gun greases, and I can't find a grease that is going to be better than my oil. The oil, the way that it creates that polymetric film, the way that it lubricates and protects, it seems to do the job fine. If you want to buy the correct gun grease or you want to use gun grease, absolutely fine. I don't see an issue with that. But grease attracts a lot of dust. It just does. Where our oil doesn't, it's got that anti-static additive in there. I've never personally had a problem. Do you put grease? Do any of you guys put grease on that spring?
No.
No.
No, I've found with your oil, a lot of other oils that I've used in the past, they'll actually, you're obviously storing your rifle upright in the safe, and the oil will slowly drain, and you can see it. And one thing I've noticed with your oil is it doesn't move, so that's why I use it on the spring, because I'm like, okay, well, it's not just going to drip off.
No, well, if you over oil your rifle, you are going to get that until it does create that polymetric film. But yeah, it being that it has that magnetic additive in there, it just stays where you want it. You know, I didn't want this to be a plug about my products. I wanted to give genuine advice, but it's hard to when you know you develop these products for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. Just going on the firing pin itself. So you degrease it and you oil it yourself. How often would you sort of touch that up with oil?
I think, so you bought the rifle, you've done it originally. I think in a hunting rifle sense, you probably don't need to do it every year. It's probably something you need to do maybe every 2 years.
Yeah.
If you're the hunter that takes 10 shots a year, and you're a stalker, then you probably don't need to pull it apart. But if you're a hound hunter and you're running could be 10 to 20 rounds a weekend, you probably need to do that at the start and at the end of every hound season. I would recommend just pulling it apart, giving it a good clean. I've got a great video on my YouTube channel on pulling a Tikka bolt apart, scrubbing it all with a toothbrush, and then putting a little bit of oil back on there, and just to get it, you know, as clean as it can be. And you know, that's, you know, a lot of guys that do run hounds, that hound gun sits in the safe all summer. Where if you pack that away with a little bit of moisture and you pull that rifle out at the start of hound season, you might have developed rusts in a hard to reach spot or a spot that you can't see, which is gonna, you know, very, very quickly cut down the lifespan of that rifle.
Yep. Ross, can you just discuss jags versus a slotted tip on the end of a cleaning rod? What's the pros and cons of each?
Yeah, well, like I said, for cleaning, I love the jag because it just pushes that carbon out the end and then it stays out there. As soon as you pull that rod back, the patch is going to fall off. So I love that for the cleaning process. But when I'm oiling the inside of the barrel, I personally like the patch holder. I think it does a much better job at oiling than a jag does. I feel like the jag is so tight through there that it's more conducive to cleaning than it is to oiling. I feel like it might maybe even just push some oil out the end of the barrel, where the patch holder, having a lot more room, seems just to lightly coat the barrel inside. So I think they're both great. If I was going to have one, I would go the jag over the patch holder for sure. But yeah, I think you need them both.
Yeah. You mentioned before when you're cleaning your barrel, you use a bore guide.
Yeah, I do.
What's your opinion on bore guides and why?
I think it just protects the action, protects the mag well, protects the face of the, you know, the action there. It also just makes the job easier for you. You just put the patch in the bore guide, run it through. You don't have to funnel around inside and try and find the hole. You know, we all have trouble finding the hole sometimes. So yeah, it just makes that job a lot easier. Plus, it's got that O-ring seal in there, so any oil or bore cleaner that you might have been too excessive with isn't going to run down into the mag well, into the action, into the bolt. It's going to keep it much cleaner, and it's going to give you a much easier time.
Okay.
Here's one for you. You're talking about oils and things running back into the mag well and things. How do you clean your chamber?
I just get, like, going back to the 3-piece rod, I like just the end section or the butt section with the handle, put a patch holder in there, and I can clean inside that action. I can clean inside a bolt once I pull the bolt apart, and I just use that first, 12-inch section, 12 to 15-inch section, and that just gives me more control over that. That's probably something that doesn't need to be cleaned as much as your barrel, so that might be a once a year, once every 6 month kind of thing as well.
Yeah. Is that where the Q-tips come in a bit handy?
Yeah, absolutely. Cotton buds are fantastic for that. I guess that the half or your third of your rod kind of acts like a bigger Q-tip, I guess. But yeah, you could get in there with them. I find them a little bit small, a little bit fiddly. They tend to break when you put too much pressure on them. So yeah, I do like the third section of a rod. How do you do it, Josh? What's your go-to?
Look, I haven't seen these for a while in any shop. Actually, that's a chamber brush.
Yeah.
I haven't seen them. I asked about them recently at a local gun shop, and it was like voodoo magic or something. It's like, oh, okay. But I used to, in the army, I kind of nicked one, a little chamber brush, and I used to use that until that, just became too dirty and worn down, so I threw it away. But and I haven't found one since. So yeah, it's Q-tips. I've used toothpicks with a little bit of patch on it before, just if you're getting a little bit anal about seeing some of the carbon that builds up. But other than that, it's the same sort of principle.
I've seen people small cable ties to a rod and use them as cleaning things as well. So you get like a little bit of a wire rod, and then you get like the smallest cable ties you can get, maybe 10 of those, and then cable tie just maybe half an inch of them to the top, cut all of the main of the cable tie off, and you've got a nice plastic brush then, homemade, that isn't going to damage any metal because it's plastic.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
That's quite smart, actually.
I've actually used the 12 gauge cleaning brush, not brush for lack of a better term, but just for the action itself, just sort of clean out the majority of the larger stuff.
Yeah, no, that definitely would work. But yeah, if you guys have any suggestions or anything you do, I think sometimes this thing's better but shared with lots of different information. But yeah, that's a few options you can do.
Well, that's one of the biggest things about doing this is there's so many myths or ways to do it and other people doing it. You're almost, which one's right?
Yeah, that's it.
And you're doing what you're doing wrong.
It's almost a religion.
I don't think there's a wrong way, really. I have an educated way of cleaning my rifle with things that make sense to me. Other people might disagree with some of the things that I do. And if it's working for them, then that's absolutely fine. I'm not here to tell anyone this is how you should clean your rifle or you should use my products. I just think this is a great little way of us sharing a bit of knowledge for someone that might not have ever cleaned a gun before or is nervous about cleaning a gun for the first time, because I know that I was nervous about cleaning a gun for the first time, and I put it off until I developed a fair bit of rust.
And then you became a subject matter expert.
Well, yeah.
Well, here's another question for you, Ross. So quite often you buy a cleaning kit for your rifle, and there's an assortment of little brushes and whatnot in there. Yeah. Now, if you're new to it and you're tempted to try one of these brushes, is it okay to shove one of those down your barrel and push it back and forth like a chimney sweep would? Would you do that?
If you're trying to clean something, I would never recommend the backward and forward motion. I would always want to keep it in one direction. Just keep pushing that material, that junk out of one way. Don't pull it back into the barrel. I think if it's plastic, go for the ones that are plastic. You can't really stuff anything up with the plastic ones until you move on to brass. But obviously brass is a lot softer than your steel. And that is safe to use too. And the reason is because it's softer, it doesn't mark or damage. So brass is really good. They don't break, they don't bend. I'm a big fan of brass, and I understand metals and how that works. So I feel very confident in that. The brass brush that's twisted in the steel metal, that's something I would maybe steer away from if you're not that accurate with the rod, or you don't have a bore guide to make sure that's going through perfectly straight. Obviously, if that is steel that the brass has been twisted in and you get that at the wrong angle, you could run the risk of scratching your barrel.
See, that makes me nervous because I run my brush back and forth.
I don't know how many times you've gone to put the brush in and you missed the bore.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with running your brush backwards and forwards. You're not damaging your gun at all by doing that. Personally, for me, I just want to push that carbon one way.
Yeah.
And if you've pushed that carbon out the front and you've got a dirty brush and you're not going to clean that in ball cleaner and you're just going to drag that back through, well, all of that carbon you've just cleaned out, you're pulling back into the barrel. That's my theory on it. It's not been, proven, but that's why I only push one way for the cleaning process.
Sometimes muscle memory kicks in and you're just used to stretching things back and forth, I think.
Yeah,
That's it.
too many years of it. There's something that you brought up. So your brush is dirty, and you're putting it in your solvent before you run it through the barrel. What do you do to your brush after you finish cleaning? Do you run it through terps or methyl or anything like that to clean the brush itself?
No, my ball cleaner does a really good job. So I've got a little tub, like a little jam jar, basically, and I make a mixture of that ball cleaner up, fairly strong if I need it to be, and I will just clean it in that, just like I'm cleaning a paintbrush or something in mineral terps or paint thinners or whatever. So I will have that in there. So I'm starting the cleaning process. I've mixed up my ball cleaner. I've got a patch in there at least, and I've got my brush in there soaking. I've pushed the brush through, I've unscrewed it, the brush goes back in the ball cleaner, I've cleaned the brush, I've screwed that back on the rod, I've pushed that through again for the second time. I then pull that brush off, clean it in that ball cleaner. The bigger chunks are gonna go to the bottom, and then I will kind of stick to, if it's dirty, I'll pour it away and make a fresh batch to do my patches. But normally by the time I've pushed that second brush through, I'm done with the ball cleaner and I'm just into clean patches.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So just on ball cleaners, are ammonia-based products bad for your rifle?
I think they're bad for us. Breathing that stuff in. You probably don't want to be dealing with that too much. I think with any of these really harsh cleaning products, we used to use a lot of ammonia to clean heads and stuff in the motor industry. And if you left that stuff on too long, it would eat into the metal. I don't personally use ammonia-based products in gun cleaning. I'm not an industrial chemist. I think it's very alkali-based, but I'm not entirely sure, and yeah, I've stayed clear of it, and I don't have any issues getting the bores clean with what we use here at High Caliber.
Beautiful.
That actually brings up something you mentioned before. You pre-make in a jam jar your diluted solution. Could you pre-make it up? Say if you're going on a trip for a month or so, and you're taking your rifle, is it okay to pre-make your cleaning solution up, put it in the jar and take it with you and store it like that for a month or two?
Yeah, absolutely. And my bore cleaner is not different to, it's very different to other companies, but the main idea of it isn't. A lot of other companies will water their bore cleaner down before they sell it to you. Mm-hmm. So instead of you buying water from me or just buying the bore cleaner, maybe I'm doing a lazy step and not diluting it down for you guys, but I'm giving you guys the option to mix it up. It will sit there mixed up forever. So that's the whole idea about that, really. So yeah, it's going to be fine for a long period of time to have it mixed up.
So for the newbies out there, how do they know with your product what ratios to use for what? How can they find that information?
It's all on the bottle. A little bit of it actually does go a long way in further testing that a lot of guys have done, cleaning brass for reloading in tumblers and ultrasonic cleaners. They absolutely love these products. They get the brass as clean as they've ever seen them. You don't need a lot in there to get it clean. If you're cleaning a rifle and you don't have time to really scrub it, mix it up as strong as you want. You can use it neat. It's not going to hurt the rifle. There's nothing in there which is going to dissolve metal. It's pH neutral, so it's not acid, it's not an alkali, it's right in the middle. You can mix it up to your heart's content or run it neat if you want to. I'm basically just saving people a lot of money by making them mix it up. So half a litre makes about 2.5 litres of bore cleaner if you want to mix it up to the maximum ratio.
Bloody hell. I think a bottle of sweet 7.62 lasted about 10 years. 2.5 litres of the stuff.
That's another thing. Like people are messaging me 2 years after purchasing their first bottle of oil, and like, dude, I oil my rifle every weekend, but your stuff just goes so far. And the question I get all the time is, why don't you make 100 ml or 150 ml bottles of oil? And I'm like, look, buy a bottle of oil from me and use it for yourself, and you get a message back within a few weeks going, yeah, okay, 2 drops has covered my whole rifle. This is going to last me a long time. So I've kind of done myself a disservice. I should have sold it in 10 ml bottles instead of 50 ml, but it does go a long way.
Yeah, very nice.
It is a ripper product. So for anyone who hasn't tried it yet, make sure you do that. Now, we've got a listener question. We've picked our favorite listener question from Instagram that we sent out the message to everyone. So, Couchy, what's the best listener question?
Well, this listener question comes from Veteran Hunts Australia.
Yep.
So one thing that sort of we've talked about ourselves for accuracy, clean between shots or not.
Yeah, I think I've done a lot of, I've been involved in 2-2 competition shooting. So indoor 22 competition shooting. And a lot of those guys would know by the way their rifle was shooting if it was time for a clean. And sometimes that could be 100 shots with a 22. So I think each caliber is different. I do a lot of practice with my rifle at 1 or 2 shots cold barrel, so I know where it shoots then, and I try and keep my gun at that kind of condition. So I clean my gun, I would say, every 3 to 5 shots, and I try and keep it as clean as possible. I know that there's a lot of difference between a hot barrel and a cold barrel. The first shot's always going to be off, but in a hunting situation, we're not shooting our barrel and then going hunting, You're always going to be shooting that first shot that counts on a cold barrel. So I think that a clean, and if I'm, long ranging or something like that, or stalking, I will just run a clean patch through the gun before I go, just to remove any excess oil. I'm not removing it all. There's still oil in there, but if I've over oiled it, I've removed most of it. So there definitely is something in that question. It is different between a dirty rifle, a clean rifle, a warm rifle, a cold rifle. I guess you just got to try and keep your results as accurate as possible. And if you know your rifle shoots good after a shot's been through it, maybe, if you've got the place to do so, once you've shot 5, 6, 7 rounds, clean the rifle, shoot another round through it, so you know that you've got that consistency. But that's just a theory on my part. I like to keep my rifles as clean as possible.
Yeah,
I think that's going to come down to knowing your rifle, exactly what you said.
Well, it's you're trying to keep the constant. If you're shooting precision, you almost want to. It's like a science experiment. You want to control the variables. So if you can shoot from clean every time, well, that bullet's not passing through, gunk, filth, this and that each time. So it's a variable that you can control.
That's the only variable you can control.
Yeah. Or I go the other way and I go, okay, I'll foul my barrel and I'll acclimatize my barrel, and then I'll roll into groups with my 22. Because then in my mind it's like, all right, well, the barrel's warm, there's fouling through it, I'm good to go. Even though the fouling can change, obviously through a microscope or something, but the theory's there. It's like, okay, well, each bullet is pushing through that fouling that's being relayed by the last shot.
Yeah, I think that I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. I think that, like a long range competition dude or guy that's at the club every weekend, he would know more about that than I would, for sure. I'm not going to claim to be an expert there, but if there is a variable that I can control, then that is the cleanliness of the rifle, and I just like a clean gun.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. All right, well, Ross, we've got to say a big thank you for this little special episode, and hopefully people got some tips and tricks off of you.
Yep.
What's new? What's coming up for High Caliber?
Well, we just released those jumbo cleaning cloths. So the same as the cloths that you come to love, but just 4 times bigger. So you're going to get a bit more life out of it. You're going to last longer between cleans. Still machine washable, and it's still that beautiful white color, which makes you see the carbon that you pull out your rifle, so you know when it needs a clean. that's about it for now. But yeah, there's going to be, as the next year comes into, we're always looking at products. We're always looking at Aussie-made products. Of course, we want to stick to that, down that road. And that's where we're going to look at. But if any of your listeners do have questions, they can reach out to me directly on Instagram or on our website, email me, and they can ask as many questions as they want. If they think one of our products can suit them, we can definitely help them, steer them in the right direction.
Beautiful. And what is that website?
So it's highcaliber.com.au.
There you
Easy.
go. Thank you very much,
That
Rossi.
was awesome.
Yeah, big
Yeah.
thank you to Ross. So, yeah, for our listeners out there, make sure you jump on to highcaliber.com.au, check out the products from High Caliber, and make sure you purchase some as well. It's great quality gear. We all love it. And Ross is a pretty cool dude as well. And
Thanks, guys.
he'll answer a question here and there too. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, Ross.
Cheers, Ross.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, buddy.
Easy one. Thanks, guys. Catch you soon.
We'll see you next time.
Gotcha.